everyone, and welcome to the 23rd PvP Live podcast. I'm your host, Jason Mackaw, along with PvP Live staff members Eldacar, JD, and of course, a special guest today, Bigmoran. Today, we're going to be talking about the beta realm for PvP testing, dominance of Shaman healers, new BGs in Warlords of Draenor, and WOD class changes. But first, how the heck are you guys doing today? Davis, going to you first.
I am doing good. I'm up here on top with you today.
Yeah, I know.
It's on the top part of the screen. So
I know.
This is pretty nice.
Yeah, you got a bump up, didn't you?
Yeah.
How was your Easter, Davis?
My Easter was pretty damn good. Yeah.
Good.
I had a good time. What about yourself?
It was really good. I've actually been playing Diablo 3 a lot. Kind of finally got into that road, and yeah, I've been kind of sucked into that. As you guys will notice too, Aridin couldn't be with us today. He has to take care of his kids, I guess. I don't know. Who knows? People that have kids, I have no idea. Eldacar, going down to you. How are you doing today, bud?
I'm doing great, man. Just been busy. I see you got a nice Game of Thrones banner going on back there.
Yeah, and
Jason?
you know what's funny is too, I'm not even caught up yet, which is really sad. But I'm there in heart.
You can't live like that, man. It's a dangerous way to live.
I know.
The internet will betray you, Jason.
I know.
It will.
I know. Spoiler alert. Yeah, I'm actually probably gonna catch up on it right after this podcast. Moran, thank you so much for being with us. It's a pleasure as always having you. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I just got done with my second wave of midterms for the semester, so
nice.
I'm free for a while, so I'm happy about that, and I'm glad to be on the podcast for a second time.
How'd the midterms go?
It was okay. One of them was significantly harder than I thought it was going to be, so I didn't really put much effort into studying for that one, and then it kind of, bit me in the butt when I was taking it, so...
That's how it always goes, right?
Yeah, of course. Typical.
Moran, of course, having a horrible hair day today, so he's not on cam, and you have that awesome little icon, little overlay that he made for himself down in the right-hand corner. But without further ado, let's jump right into the first topic of the night. Someone tweeted at senior PvP designer Brian Holinka asking him, will there be pre-made characters in the beta for people to test PvP? Holinka responded back right away with, yes, we'll be standing up an additional beta realm with level 100 templates that can only access PvP instances for PvP testing. Now, of course, this is something we've talked about on the podcast a bunch, and especially Jeff Eldacar down there has been very adamant about. Everyone needs to test out the PvP aspects of the game during the beta trials to help out the developers. Eldacar, going down to you first. What do you think about this? PvP beta realms just for PvP testing?
I think that this is absolutely fantastic. And this is the first time in the history of WoW I've ever seen anything like this. I mean, there's always been two different realms, and one of them's been a PvP realm, but they've never done anything to this level where they've devoted an entire realm specifically to PvP testing.
Right.
And one of the biggest barriers to PvP testing in past expansion betas has been they require everybody to level up to the max level because they need people to test the level up process. They need people to get in there, test the quests, test all the items, test, the other aspects of the game. And when you have that barrier to testing the upper levels for such a huge portion of the testing, it really limits people's ability to get in there, organize testing events, and just, having enough players at that high enough level to do the testing. So to see something like this where we're going to have a dedicated realm with pre-mades and hopefully Blizzard sanction organized events that are focusing testing on whatever they need testing on at the time, I think we're going to see a much better product come out of this.
Absolutely. Actually, since we're talking about Brian Holinka, he is actually in chat with us right now. So thanks for joining us. If you guys have any questions for him, don't bog him down, but I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any kind of questions you guys have. JD, going to you next. Beta realms for PvP testing. Going over the Holinka response on Twitter. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, like Jeff was saying, the biggest thing is the leveling. I think most PvPers the leveling part of the game isn't really an experience for them. It's just something they have to do to be able to PvP again, if that makes sense. So I think that will definitely encourage a lot of people to jump on and try it. And, you know, you might even get a bunch of people that just go on for even just a day and they make a character they've never played before or whatever. But at the same time, at least stuff gets played, if that makes sense, and stuff will get tested because of it. And hopefully the testing will be done in a thorough enough way that, you know, we can have a really good first season straight out the bat for Warlords of Draenor. Because I think the first seasons of expansions for a while have seemed a little bit, you know, it's like, you know, what didn't they quite fix? You know, what bug got through? But hopefully, this time we'll get enough people on the realms testing and stuff like that, so that things don't get through, and there's enough feedback about it that there's no problems.
I'd actually go to Moran right now, but it looks like we're trying to connect back with him. It looks like there's a little technical issue. But so I actually wanted to go to him about a certain topic, but I guess we'll just hold on one second here while he gets back. Eldacar, going down to you. Is there anything else that you're kind of excited about that you think is going to come out of the PvP testing on Beta Realms?
Well, I'm hoping we'll get a lot of testing focused on Ashran in particular. I mean, more generalized PvP testing where you know testing everything is good, because people need to have testing focused on class balance, item balance, ability balance, particularly with all of the ability pruning and the major game system changes that are happening with the expansion. But more focused testing on Ashran is really going to be important, and I think that's going to be a big focus of this beta realm, because Ashran in particular is going to require a certain number of people in it at any given time in order to do effective testing. It has a critical mass point that it has to reach before the zone is going to function properly, right. Or at least I would imagine based on the way they've described it. So having enough people in there to actually do effective testing is extremely important. And, you know, personally, I'm just really excited for Ashran. So being able to get in there and test it is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually, Moran, are you back with us now?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, it looks like you got...
This times I forgot this happens, like, lately in my area. I think because it's starting to get into, like, high bandwidth usage in my area, so sometimes I DC around this time.
Oh, no problem at all. You know, Moran, actually, we were kind of talking earlier in the day. You actually think they were testing, in previous expansions, you think they were testing PvP in BGs and not arenas specifically, and it kind of led to a problem. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, from my understanding, the majority of the damage coefficient testing for abilities is done in Battleground settings, and this was a problem at launch for Mists of Pandaria because the Hunter ability Stampede was doing twice as much damage as it was supposed to be doing. I think it was actually ignoring resilience on top of that. And the reason why this this bug wasn't addressed as quickly as it could have been is because I think a lot of the testing, from my understanding, they were doing a lot of the testing of this damage in a BG setting, where the damage is only bugged in an arena setting. So I think, you know, this PvP realms on the beta testing might remedy that problem a little bit, or reduce the chance that an ability is bugged for launch.
So, overall, that's actually really interesting, because I guess that's something I didn't know, and maybe Holinka and Shaq could actually elaborate a little bit more on that if they do kind of focus PvP testing in BGs and not arenas in the past, at least. I don't know what they're going to do for Warlords. But also, Moran, what do you think overall about, you know, having, you know, basically a beta realm just for PvP testing?
Overall, I think that's a good change. I think if you have a designated place where you can focus your efforts into fixing any sort of balance problems during the beta, I think that is definitely good just to make the game a better experience on launch day. And I think what was mentioned is in the past you had to level up a character, and I think that's always kind of been disappointing, or something that has made players less wanting, I guess, to do PvP on the beta. and I think removing that block is definitely something that will help the beta testing phase overall.
Holinka actually just said in chat, I can't really comment on how it used to be, but we're definitely going to do a lot of coordinated arena testing for Warlords. So I think that's something everyone should be pretty excited about. So hopefully maybe a bit more balance. Before we move on, I just want to remind everyone to go to pvp-live.com, bookmark that site, follow us here on Twitch, subscribe here on Twitch. We actually just got a new subscriber, Adorable. Thank you so much for subscribing. Really appreciate it. And make sure to follow us on Twitter. And Eldacar, I didn't even realize you were wearing those bunny ears. I should have moved your cam down a little bit more to kind of highlight those.
Sure.
I guess that's, move yours up a little bit. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Just on
See those ears?
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Gummo, but you kind of remind me of that lead character, that very odd lead
it's
character.
Easter time. Got to get in the spirit, man.
Yeah, absolutely. VHell's actually in chat too. Thanks for joining along. Moving on, we kind of want to talk about healer balance. Moran was talking about earlier in the day as well, kind of the dominance of shaman healers in arena comps right now, and how they're good for the current meta. Moran, going to you. What are your thoughts right now on shaman healers and comps?
Well, I think a similar trend in this expansion happened in Cataclysm, where at the beginning of the expansion, you have a lot of high burst physical damage cleaves being successful. Mm-hmm. And in Cataclysm Season 9, that was KFC. I think Warrior Rogue was pretty good then too. And then towards the end of the expansion, you have a lot of spell cleaves dominating the ladder. And Resto Shamans have a lot of tools that are specifically good against countering spell cleaves. Obviously, they have Grounding Totem, which they can use to avoid CC or to ground incoming damage, such as Chaos Bolt. And on top of that, they have things like Tremor. And in addition, because spell cleaves tend to be dominant towards the end of the expansion, spell cleave games are pretty long. And I think Shaman's Mastery tends to cater towards longer games and tends to kind of not negate, but it does better against dampening. Because the lower the target is, the more healing they receive. So I think in general, I think their mastery is good for healing when games go into dampening. But just because they are such a good healer for healing spell cleaves, and I think they fit well definitely within the current meta, just because the prevalence of spell cleaves on the 3v3 ladder.
Something else you were kind of talking about earlier too is, there's not many paladins at high ratings right now. Why do you think that is?
It's exactly for the reason why there are so many shamans, is because paladins tend to do better against healing physical damage cleaves, healing teams with lots of high burst physical damage, where they tend to be relatively weaker against spell cleaves, simply because they have really limited tool sets to avoiding CC. And on top of that, if they do get put into a CC, they have to rely heavily on their cooldowns, and their cooldowns, obviously they don't have them every time they get put into a CC, and they need them to top their partners when they come out of a polymorph, for example, where shamans tend to have relatively shorter cooldowns, and they have really strong hot effects. So getting CC'd as a shaman isn't as detrimental as getting CC'd on a holy paladin.
Davis, going to you. What are your thoughts? Have you seen a lot of shaman healers in many of the comps you've been facing? Why do you think that is, if so?
Yeah, Shamans and Druids are just about the only healers you meet, and then there's the occasional paladin thrown in, and very rarely, priests and monks are really rare to me. I don't really see them that often. But yeah, Resto Shamans at the moment are just so dominant, and I don't really know particularly why it is, other than the fact that, like Bigmoran was saying, they're better at healing against spell cleaves, and wizards seem to be doing pretty well at the moment. But I don't know. I think Holy Paladins are actually like a really strong healer in spell cleaves. I could be wrong, but maybe it's just because I play melees. But I just think because of the the healing cooldowns they have. They're a lot better at dealing with melee damage. So when they play with casters, like Mage Lock Paladin, especially, I think that's one of the most annoying comps to play against as a melee player. So yeah, it'd be. I mean, I don't really know how that can be dealt with though. Like, shouldn't one healer be good at dealing with, like it is? Shouldn't one healer be good at dealing with casters and one healer's good at dealing with melee, rather than both being, pretty good at dealing with either of them? Otherwise, all healers would be really homogenized, I think.
The problem with that kind of rock, paper, scissors gameplay is you end up with situations where wizards are dominant or melee cleaves are dominant, and then certain classes, certain healers get kind of pushed out because they're more focused on certain activities. And, just the fact that we have melee cleaves or caster cleaves dominant over melee cleaves at certain times, that itself is a problem, I think. But it's really difficult to make every possible different type of comp and every different spec balanced. I mean, it's pretty much impossible. But one thing I think is a little interesting is just the fact that caster cleaves are so dominant right now. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I remember it seems like at the end of expansions, usually melee cleaves are historically dominant because they tend to scale so well with gear, and casters seem to be dominant at the beginning of expansions. So to have this kind of reversal seems strange to me.
What are your guys' thoughts on that? Let's open that up to a round table. Moran, Davis?
Well, I think more than anything, spell cleaves tend to scale better with skill, and I know that's going to sound kind of a lot of people are going to have problems with me saying that, but I think caster cleaves have a higher skill cap because you have spammable CC, whereas a lot of physical damage cleaves rely on 3-minute cooldowns. Spell cleaves aren't really limited to relying on 3-minute cooldowns. In fact, like every 30 seconds, for example, an MLS can score a kill, a Mage Lock Shaman can score a kill with Deep Freeze and Blanket CS on the healer. So I think more than anything, as the expansion goes on, people get better at playing the expansion. And I think that kind of lends itself to making spell cleaves especially dominant in the later parts of the expansion. That isn't to say that melee cleaves can't be successful. It's just significantly harder for a melee cleave to be successful when there are a bunch of spellcasters on the arena ladder.
Eldacar, I know you kind of jumped in there after Davis stopped speaking, but is there anything else that you want to talk about? There's not many paladins at high ratings, or anything else about shamans?
No, I think it's been pretty well covered, but I am interested to see how things are going to be in Warlords of Draenor. I mean, with every class receiving such significant changes and the game systems themselves receiving such huge changes, I'm sure the board is going to be completely reshuffled. And, whatever balance problems exist right now, it's hard to tell whether they're still going to exist in Warlords. I mean, we just don't have the frame of reference to really understand how it's all going to play out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, for sure. And even, during the, kind of like we were talking about earlier too, in the beta realm for PvP testing, to see how things turn out. So hopefully that's sooner rather than later. Jumping into the next topic, and it's kind of going to be the bulk of our night tonight, is Warlords of Draenor class changes. We tried to talk about it on the last podcast, but we kind of ran out of time. Kind of jumping right into this, I'm going to start with Moran. Let's talk about Druids. The removal of Symbiosis. All Druids now have Survival Instinct. And I think the biggest one is Cyclone and Fear share the same DR that you and Eldacar can go on and argue about. But take it away, Moran.
Well, the first thing, Symbiosis. Symbiosis was a really cool ability, and actually I like it a lot. But the obvious problem with Symbiosis is it really kind of encouraged Druids to play with certain classes over other classes. For instance, I don't think this entire expansion, with the exception of maybe like 20 games in 3v3, I don't think I've queued like a single long series of queues with anything other than a Mage as a Resto Druid, because having Ice Block is so huge. And obviously ferals often pair themselves with priests or paladins, so they get bubble or disperse. So it kind of, one of the consequences is it didn't necessarily force, but it indirectly forced druids to play with certain classes, which really limited, who they wanted to queue with. And I think, that kind of ruined incentives a little bit for druids to kind of branch out and try new comps. But one of the other things you mentioned also is in the expansion, it's planned that all druids have survival instincts. And I think this change isn't that important for Resto, because it is very rare that Resto druids ever get trained or ever the target of focus in an arena setting. In fact, I can only think of 2 comps that would actually target a Resto druid with the intention of killing them, and that's Monk TSG and Kitty Cleave. But in general, this change is going to be really impacting in RBGs, because the meta for RBGs is to have a Guardian Druid, and if you decrease the cooldown on their biggest defensive cooldown and give it 2 charges, that's going to change balance and chances that you can get a kill on maps like Warsong Gulch or Twin Peaks, where it's already very hard to score a kill on a Guardian Druid, and having 2 charges of your most powerful defensive ability is really going to affect when you can actually make offensive pushes in these rated battlegrounds.
Something else, one of the major topics too we were talking about is, Cyclone of Fear sharing the same DR. What are your thoughts?
I'm against this change. I would prefer to see Fear and Polymorph share DR, and obviously I'm going to be a bit biased here when I say that, but I think Cyclone is uniquely Druid, and I think it's a unique having a unique diminishing returns. It makes Druids like the class they are, and I can kind of understand it being removable with Mass Spell and immunities. I think that's kind of a change that might be needed, but having it share a DR with Fear is something I'm somewhat against, and I'd rather see Fear and Polymorph share a DR.
Eldacar, going to you. And first, Davis, looks like you turned out a light there. It looks like you went completely dark on us. Eldacar, going to you. First, Cyclone and Fear sharing the same DR. What are your thoughts? What's your rebuttal to that?
Well, I'm not 100% positive that Cyclone should be sharing a DR with Fear specifically, but I definitely feel like it needs to be sharing a DR with something. I completely disagree with the idea that it should be a special snowflake and it should be what makes Druids unique. A class should not be defined by their DRs. And in this new environment where people are supposed to spend less time in CC, there's supposed to be less CCs out there, less complexity, less DR categories, having that one exception, this one spell for this one class is going to be its own thing. I don't think that makes any sense. Everybody should be sharing DRs with everybody else. There should be even balance between the DR categories. We should not have one class that's just doing its own thing that synergizes with everybody because they have their special snowflake CC that doesn't share DR with anything.
So, do you think this is, in your opinion, are Druids overpowered right now because of them not sharing the same DR?
I wouldn't say they're overpowered in the current game model. I still don't like it in the current game model, but it makes no sense to me at all in the new game model. Given the overarching design direction for Warlords of Draenor, it should absolutely share CC with something. I feel like Fear is a good initial choice. I don't know if that's going to be the best thing long term. We'll have to see what kind of comps come out and what kind of synergies end up presenting themselves. It's really difficult to just armchair quarterback it and try to predict that kind of stuff without getting in there and doing testing.
Also, Jeff, what are your thoughts on the removal of Symbiosis and all Druids now having Survival Instinct?
I think the removal of Symbiosis is fantastic. Just from the ability pruning perspective, Symbiosis was not one ability, it was like 30 different abilities. And it's ridiculous from a balance perspective and from a complexity perspective. The developers could have spent an enormous amount of time just balancing that one spell. and it's a relatively new addition that is not really class defining. So I think it was an ideal choice for pruning.
That seems reasonable.
I'd like to just get one more word about the Cyclone change. I think what I'm most scared about is because Cyclone is uniquely Druid, and because there's always been this kind of hidden rivalry between Resto Druids and Resto Shamans. That's why I'm somewhat nervous for this change, because what we saw in Season 11 for Resto Druids is that in most comps where you could be playing with a Resto Druid, it was almost infinitely better to be playing with a Resto Shaman in those comps. And I think the finesse, I guess, or the nuance of Resto Druid is landing effective Cyclones. And I think for a Resto Druid to be successful, they need to be landing successful Cyclones. And I think that is completely not the case for Resto Shamans. Obviously, they have Hex, which is kind of, I guess, their version of Cyclone, so to speak. I think Resto Shamans don't need to necessarily land effective hexes to be successful in Arena. It certainly helps, but I think that's the main difference between Resto Druids and Resto Shamans. And so if you put Cyclone on a DR category with something that a Resto Druid plays with frequently, I think you're going to make Resto Shamans comparatively a stronger healer, because the need for that additional CC that the Resto Druid has is going to be completely wiped out if the CC shares DR with something else in the arena.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but healing styles in Warlords of Draenor are going to be radically changed by the heavy removal of instant cast heals, by the increased mana cost, by the whole triage system that they're trying to aim for. And obviously class balance is going to be totally shaken up as well. So to try to make an argument for an exception to a design concept based on current balance, I just don't, that just doesn't follow for me. I mean, if they still have, it feels like Druids are falling behind, and that's still the way that you've got to play them, and there's really no other option, I could see maybe making that exception to make sure that they have a good game experience. But design concepts as a rule, I mean, you've got to try to keep everybody in the same, under the same rules when you're doing major system changes like they're doing with Warlords of Draenor. And the more exceptions you make, the more complex it's going to get and the more difficult to balance it's going to be. And if you make an exception for Druids, why not an exception for Warlocks? Why not an exception for Polymorph? I mean, if you're using those exceptions as your primary method of balancing, that's just going to cause so many headaches.
Davis, going to you. What are your thoughts overall on the Druid changes? Cyclone and Fear sharing the same DR. First off on that.
First off on that, well, it's like Blizzard have got LSD in their sights, and they're no more of this. I don't know. I don't see it as a bad change necessarily, but I can understand why Druids would be annoyed about it. But at the same time, Fear and Cyclone together are kind of unique in that, like, Fear makes you run around and Cyclone makes you immune from... Are you immune to mana regen as well as health regen in Cyclones?
I have no idea.
But yeah, so Cyclone has that advantage that, you know, it can't really be broken. But I guess on the other hand, if a bad Cyclone can be really bad. But yeah, I think in general, Resto Druid CC was too strong because they are so mobile and they can get it off so much. I think, especially combined with the disorienting roar and mighty bash and things like that, it gives them a lot of opportunities to get it off. But I guess that comes down to how offensive you think a healer should be able to be. And with Warlords of Draenor is going to be encouraging the triage playstyle, so I presume that will mean there's a lot more room for offensive play. Like, there are going to be spells healers will regularly use that are not heals, or is that wrong?
Moran?
Would they be doing damage?
I I don't really know about the triage system or paradigm that's you're talking about, but
Well, the general idea, as I understand it, is that health pools are going to be much larger relative to the amount of damage and healing that players can do. So you'll spend more time between 0 and 100 health-wise.
okay. So
And it takes longer to kill people, takes longer to heal them up, and you've got to make more intelligent decisions about who you're healing and when.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that system was probably relatively similar to how health pools were in Burning Crusade. That will, just from my experience, thinking back, like in retrospect of Burning Crusade, that was similar to how it was. So, I mean, I don't know necessarily how that will affect the Cyclone change, or how the Cyclone change will affect that. But
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that we'll still need Cyclone on its own DR, and it's possible that's going to be the only way that things realistically work. But it's really, really hard to judge with the sheer number of massive changes that are happening, what's going to work and what's not. The only way to figure it out is really to get in there and test it and iterate on the design. And I think that's pretty much Blizzard's MO. But in the past, like we were talking about earlier, there just hasn't been too much focused PvP testing. And there hasn't been much organized PvP testing. So those designs didn't really get iterated on too much, or at least it didn't seem like they did until the game released and you were in Season 1 of that expansion.
Yeah.
Dave is kind of wrapping up the Druid class changes for Warlords of Draenor. What are your thoughts on the removal of Symbiosis?
So this is a big one for me because I Flavor of the Month rerolled a Feral Druid for Tyrannical season. But I can't play a Feral Druid without Disperse. Like I just can't do it. I'm a terrible Feral Druid without it because as soon as people go on me, I just feel like I'm gonna die all the time. So yeah, to me that's a really huge change, but I think it's one that needed to happen because it changed the class too much. I feel like the playstyle that you have when you have a symbiosis from a priest, and if you didn't have a symbiosis from a priest as a feral druid, was really strange because you're lacking such a big cooldown that means you can't just run wherever you want to run. But yeah, I think it's a change that needed to happen because it was kind of overpowered. I think the way that some of the symbioses would work and others wouldn't, it just really discouraged druids to play with anything but a mage, like Bigmoran was saying.
Moving on to the next class, Mages. Presence of Mind removed, only now available for Arcane, and they reduce the cooldown to Alter Time. Eldacar, starting with you, what are your thoughts on these mage changes in the Warlords of Draenor?
I like them, particularly the removal of Presence of Mind. Well, not the complete removal, but I like the idea that all of these things that are making casts instant, not just for mages, but for other classes as well, are being removed and trimmed out. I mean, they're kind of fun. I mean, when I'm playing my mage, I love POM, but from a PvP perspective, it's like a no skill button. And obviously timing it is important, but I like the direction that they're going where you're forced to hard cast spells more because it provides more opportunity for not just the caster's skill to shine in their positioning and their timing, but also the people they're playing against to shine in, trying to line of sight those spells, trying to counter those spells, interrupt those spells. It adds more skill to the matchup when you have to hard cast spells. So I really like it.
Moran, going to you. Presence of Mind removed, only now available for Arcane Mages. What are your thoughts on that? No more Palm Polys.
I think that's overall good to increase the skill cap for mages. I think that's a sort of a nuance that very few mages have seemed to master, is the ability to land polymorphs while being trained by 2 melee. and I think it's going to force mages to kind of up their game, so to speak, to land effective CC. But at the same time, with this change, I think there needs to be maybe some changes as well to interrupts, simply because even as I mentioned, it is a nuance for mages to land polymorphs without having palm up, and I think the amount of interrupts makes that relatively difficult, and it relies on the mage having really good frost novas and cross CC. So I think maybe in addition to that, the removal or the increased cooldown on some interrupt abilities might pair nicely with that. And as I mentioned before, one of the things I'd like to see changed for arcane and fire mages is the ability to get deep freezes from range. And I think those are the two things that are holding arcane and fire mages back. Because obviously frost mages have Fingers of Frost, which allows them to use deep freeze without having a nova on the target. And I think if fire mages and arcane mages had some sort of utility like that, it would make them infinitely better in PvP and definitely increase their viability.
Davis, going to you. Presence of Mind being removed, now only available for arcane mages in Warlords of Draenor. What are your thoughts? It looks like your cam's frozen. That's a horrible face that you're making. Oh, there he goes. It's bad.
Well, that's not good. Yeah, my webcam keeps freezing, I think.
That's alright.
Anyway,
We can still hear you.
Astral Palm, I don't play a mage, because mages are one of the wizards, and that's not my thing.
It's rogue only for you, bud, huh?
Just strict melee only,
Okay.
basically. But yeah, it'd be good to see Palm gone, but at the same time, Palm has been a big part of Mage gameplay for all of MUP, and even though, obviously they need to remove some things, at the same time, it feels like a lot of core things about classes are being completely taken out, and I don't know, maybe it'll remove a certain edge to the class if that's true. But at the same time, I don't think it's impossible for a mage to get a sheep off without Palm. So I think they'll do okay in the coming expansion. But yeah, there's so much that can change. Maybe it will be a really big change to them, and frost mages will struggle to get sheeps off. Who knows?
Before we move on to the next class and the class changes for Warlords of Draenor, I just want to remind everyone to go to pvp-live.com, bookmark that site, follow us here on Twitch. We even have a sub button with some awesome emotes. Maybe Jay or Aridin or Danny or someone can spam those for us to show them off real quick. And remember to follow all of us on Twitter. Next, Warlords of Draenor class changes, Death Knights. Jeff, starting with you, there's been a big change to how diseases are implemented. What are your thoughts, or can you give a little explanation on that?
Well, my understanding of the basic design goal is that you don't have to put up your diseases in order to get maximum throughput on things like Obliterate and your other big spenders. The way it is now, a lot of abilities have damage multipliers or effectiveness multipliers based on the number of diseases you have up on the target. Mm-hmm. So you really have to make sure that they're up on the target and they haven't been cleansed off or removed from by an ice block or a bubble or whatever else, particularly before you pop your cooldowns and blow everything you have going for a kill. And it's just another level of complexity. And having it so you don't need to have that up on the target will make target switching easier, and it'll make it easier to focus on the other aspects of gameplay. So it's just another layer of complexity. It's been shaved off. Overall, I like it, but it does kind of make Death Knights easier to play. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out. I mean, I'm kind of worried with all the ability pruning that some classes might get too easy to play, and we might get back to, at least for some classes in spec, something like what we had with Rep Paladins back in like early Wrath, where there wasn't a whole lot of decision making involved, and you pretty much just ran behind somebody and auto attacked and mashed your buttons as soon as they came off cooldown. And I hope we don't end up back in that kind of situation with some of the classes.
Davis, going to you. What are your thoughts on the disease changes for Death Knights?
Well, one of the most annoying things as a melee player is having to put up dots just so you can do damage. So now you don't have to put up dots. So that's good. Yeah, I don't think it's anything that's going to be a massive game changer. Because I think diseases were already pretty easy to apply and keep up, even if they're getting dispelled on cooldown. I think it's still not too taxing to try and keep them up. So I don't think it's a huge gameplay changer by any means, because they can AoE spread their diseases. So I don't think there's a lot of situations where they're necessarily feeling like they can't put diseases up, but they really need to get them up. But yeah, it's nice to see that little change. That just makes it a little bit easier for them.
I agree with you, JD. It was never particularly hard to get those diseases up, and DKs have so many different ways from, forget the name of the spell off the top of my head, but there's just so many different ways to get those diseases up on the targets, and it was never really challenging, but it was still something you had to pay attention to and keep an eye on, particularly before you blew your cooldown. So that's just one less thing that DKs have to pay attention to.
Moran, going to you, Death Knights are kind of less favorable, I guess, in high-end PvP. Does this affect any of the comps that you play against, you think, in Warlords of Draenor?
Right now, the most dominant DK comp is Hunter, DK, Resto Shaman. And that comp tends to focus on training one target the entire game. So, based on current gameplay, I don't think it's going to change too much. What this change reminds me of, from what I've been hearing, I don't really understand it fully, is it sounds like the equivalent of a rogue needing to put up Rupture or having a bleed on the target before he can do increased damage. Yeah, and so I don't think it's too. It's something that's not necessarily annoying that you have to do, but having to do it is essential for doing damage. And there are cases where maybe you can't put a bleed on the target when you want to do damage as a rogue. I'm not too familiar with Death Knights, so I don't know if that's ever an issue for Death Knights. But I don't think it will change balance too much. It's just kind of, a quality of life improvement that doesn't have too bearing on game balance and comp balance.
Davis, going to the next class, starting with you, your favorite class, your best class. Oh my gosh, your rank 1 gladiator class, Rogue. This is actually a pretty big change. I mean, combo points for rogues are now shared across all targets. You no longer lose your combo points when switching targets. In my opinion, that's a pretty big change, but I'm not a rogue mage, or rogue main. So what are your thoughts on this change in Warlords of Draenor?
Well, I'm really happy to see it because it is something that a lot of the rogue community have really wanted for a long time. It's just combo points that are on the player and not necessarily on the target. Because there are a few situations where you can accidentally gain a combo point if you've redirected your combo points onto another target. So that can be a little frustrating. But this will kind of prevent that from happening, where you've got 5 combo points stacked up on someone and then all of a sudden you only have 1 combo point and it's stacked on the wrong person. So it'll be really good for helping with that. And in general, I mean, I'm just kind of excited for it because there's a lot of times where you can waste combo points when you're trying to maintain buffs. You might accidentally waste combo points, especially if you've got premeditation up when you're stealth. So yeah, I'm just kind of glad to see that rogues are getting some little quality of life changes.
It seems like
there'll be more to come.
Yeah, it seems like it's a lot easier learning curve too, with not doing it, target specific, right? I mean, is this something that feral druids are going to start asking for now too?
Well, I think they get it too. I think feral druids are getting it as well in Warlords of Draenor. So if they want it, they can have it too.
One of the very specific things this change is addressing is how combo points work in situations with intervene. That's usually what can mess up combo points. Say for instance you're a rogue and you're hitting a holy paladin. You have 4 combo points on the holy paladin and you want to get ready to kidney them. And say a warrior intervenes when you're trying to get your 5th combo point. So the warrior will intervene the hemorrhage or the backstab. So that means now the warrior has 1 combo point, and every combo point you had on the paladin that you had ready for kidney is completely gone. That's not an issue that's like happens very often, but it's definitely annoying when it does happen. And I don't think it's something that's probably not the warrior's probably not intending to do that, but it's just a consequence of him doing it. So I think this change will help remedy certain issues like that. And I can't think of any other issues off the top of my head where combo points tend to get messed up, but intervene is definitely one of them, and this change will kind of help remedy that.
Eldacar, going down to you, rogues. Combo points for rogues are now shared across all targets. You no longer lose your combo points when switching targets. Is this a good change? What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't play a rogue or like at any high level. I've got some little rogue alt that I like playing, but I think it's a good change, and I think it's really a demonstration of the fact that Blizzard will make game design changes that are designed to improve gameplay first at the expense of maybe theming. I mean, from a thematic perspective, it doesn't really make sense to have combo points on everybody or have combo points specific to the rogue, because when you're doing a combo on somebody, it's kind of the idea that you're doing a combo on that target. But that just doesn't, I don't think it works that well from a gameplay perspective. I mean, it definitely feels like this is a good direction to go in, even if it doesn't make sense from a theme perspective.
Yeah, I actually, I really like the change. It seems like it's going to be a lot easier to manage combo points now in rogues. And like I said, I don't play a rogue, but this would actually be a stepping stone to maybe possibly playing one, because it seems like it's a lower learning curve, which I'm sure a lot of people don't want to hear, but it seems like it's, a lot simpler for new rogues to get into. Moving on to the next class, this is kind of an interesting change for Warlocks. Demonic Gateways no longer have charges, and the max distance is now 40 yards down from 70 yards. It's almost half the distance. That's a huge change. Eldacar, starting with you, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, during arena play, this is really going to affect, especially positioning.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely going to make Warlocks more vulnerable. Not being able to move that huge distance, and I don't know exactly what the measurements are between pillars and Blade's Edge, or not Blade's Edge, like Nagran. But I mean, if you can't use those gateways anymore to get around a pillar, get out of line of sight, or you can't use them as effectively to create distance, I mean that. I don't know how that's going to end up playing out. I mean, obviously, balance is going to be totally changed, like we've said a million times. But it does seem like it's going to make Warlocks significantly more vulnerable, particularly when they need that space more than ever to be able to get those hard casts off that they have to do now.
Well, not just Warlocks more vulnerable, too, their whole team, right? Yeah. I mean, that changes the dynamic of of any Warlock comp, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does definitely affect all the Warlock comps and all the Warlocks teammates, but I'm more worried about Warlocks in particular because, they're always going to be the common factor there. Everybody else, they're not balanced around Gateway. They're not necessarily going to have it in a match, and I doubt that everything is being designed around the idea of having that Gateway, because you don't always have it. But Warlocks are balanced around that, so I'm mostly concerned with how it's going to affect them.
Our resident Warlock in chat, Danny Eridan, says Gateway is so strong because it benefits the whole team. It's a good nerf. I wish Danny was in chat right now to talk a little bit more about this. I'd like to hear his opinion. Moran, going to you, what are your thoughts about the max distance is now 40 yards down from 70 yards on Demonic Gateway?
I think that's a good change overall, because even if a Warlock gates in that situation, or someone on his team gates, the majority of spells you're going to be using are 40 yards. So I think you'll still be able to attack the Warlock even though he's away. It might be harder for melee, or it'll make it easier for melee definitely to catch up to the Warlock. But as far as this affecting game balance, I think it might affect certain comp versus comp strategy decisions, because I know like from my personal experience, I played Fire Mage, Destro Warlock, Resto Druid at the beginning of this expansion, and one of the toughest comps for us was Shaman KFC, and we incorporated gate a lot into our strategy, and using effective gateways, and I think it might kind of damage the balance on certain very specific comp versus comp setups. But overall, I think this is a good change because gateway is such a powerful ability.
Well, it seems like, you're only going to be able to go halfway between pillar and pillar now, right? I mean, it seems like this is actually a big change for Warlock comps. JD, Davis, going to you. What are your thoughts on the lowering of the distance of demonic gateways?
Well, I think I could be wrong on this, and someone please tell me if I am. But I think there's only maybe one or two arenas, Tolveron and the Tiger's Peak one, that are actually big enough for you to make a gateway that's longer than 40 yards. Am I wrong?
Blade's Edge is big enough.
Oh, Blade's Edge too. Yeah.
There's like 3 locations on Blade's Edge where it's big enough.
All right. Okay. But I think the cooldown change was really needed, because giving every class less than a minute cooldown leap is, that's a really strong ability, and especially for classes that already have, like druids that already have blinks and things like that. It just kind of, it all adds up and makes stuff very hard to get to and to touch. And so I think the cooldown change is one of the biggest parts of it, and also the charge change. So that means that they can use it in the opener now. Like, they don't have to worry too much about waiting for charges to build up. So I guess that'll be a big help against rogue teams.
Well, there's still a cooldown though, right? I don't have the notes in front of me.
But I think the cooldown's only for one player. So, like, you get a cooldown to use the gateway.
It's still individual, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that charges don't need to be built up will mean that, lock Shaman teams don't have such a hard time against rogue teams in the opener and things like that. I guess that's good.
Moran, did you have... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, JD.
No, I'm done.
Oh, I heard Moran. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, it just came to mind that the removal of the charges is actually really important for certain rated battleground maps, and the ones that come to mind are Silver Shard Mines. That particular match is really dependent on Warlocks having good gateways, and not only that, but Warlocks having, or your team having a strong team fight and floating around the map, being really mobile. And so if all 7 of your, usually you'll have 7 people in a team fight in the map, probably 7 or 8 people in a team fight. If you can have all 8 of your people that are going to go to the team fight get there at the same time, that's actually really strong. So I was just thinking, in an RBG setting, that's pretty important, and that change will actually be probably good for RBGs and bad for arenas for Warlocks.
Moving on to the final and last class of this podcast, let's talk about monks a little bit here. Healing Sphere, the spell, has been removed in Warlords of Draenor completely. Now, Healing Spheres only come from Mastery. This is actually pretty interesting, because monks seem to rely, I don't want to say rely, but they seem to lean a lot on spheres, at least some of the play styles that I've seen. Eldacar, going to you first. What are your thoughts on this change as the monk?
I've got to be honest. I have never played a monk healer, so...
well, I mean, just interesting enough, just watching BlizzCon, watching Danny Carey at BlizzCon, for example, right?
Yeah, well, Danny Carey was definitely doing some work with those healing spheres, and that was watching the best in action. So, I mean, it does seem like it's one of the monk's more defining abilities from what I've seen of them. So it is interesting that they're kind of gimping it, but I don't know.
If you don't play monk, right.
Having not played it,
right.
I really can't give an intelligent opinion on it.
Well, the most important aspect of Healing Sphere, well, one of the most important aspects of Healing Sphere is it renders Smoke Bomb almost completely useless because the monk can just drop orbs inside the Smoke Bomb and heal his partner that's being attacked by the rogue. And that's one of the things that I've never really liked playing against monk teams, especially because I play Rogue Mage Druid, is Smoke Bomb is pretty useless for the most part. I mean, it's good for like preventing gateways from warlocks and I guess preventing monk bubble, but the monk can still heal through Smoke Bomb with ease using his healing spheres, and they do have a lot of throughput, so they definitely do a lot of healing. So I think it's good for addressing that problem, and problem in quotes, so to speak. I think that's good for addressing that, definitely.
Davis, going to you, kind of heading up on Moran's talking about rogues and smoke bombs. What are your thoughts on healing spheres being removed from monks?
Well, I am endlessly infuriated by monk healers, so I'm kind of glad
this sounds like it's
getting
perfect for you.
a little bit of a nerf, to be honest. The stun immunity rubbish that they have, and
mobility.
The mobility and the healing spheres are just crazy good. Yeah, at the same time, it's like removing backstab from a rogue, essentially, I guess. So it's going to be really weird to see how they they deal with what monks will be using instead and how monks will heal. I don't know. I mean, what is the PvE rotation like for monk healers? Does anyone have any clue?
No idea.
I had no idea, but somebody did bring up a good point in chat that the healing spheres do not put the monk in combat. Now, I'm going to take them at the word for that, but I don't know if anybody else remembers some of the I think there were the semifinal matches at the last BlizzCon where Danny Carey was just drinking.
Oh yeah.
He was drinking non-frickin' stop. I mean, he would drop those healing spheres, keep his teams up through some kind of black magic, and he was drinking like every minute.
Oh, yeah.
He was out in the corner drinking. I mean, everybody was going nuts about it.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Novos is in chat right now. I guess the team captain of Blacksmith Hammers Equip, BlizzCon competitor, and teammate of Danny Carey, well-known Mistweaver monk. And Novos says monks will need serious buffs or they won't be good without them, referring to healing spheres. That's a pretty strong comment. Moran, going to you, what do you think about Novo saying that? Do you think that's true?
Well, I think, for one, healing spheres are one of the reasons why monks are generally unkillable for especially melee teams. And I know that's not to say that they can't ever be killed. I know comps like Thug Cleave are actually really good at killing monks. But it's definitely one of the things that allows the monk to stay up while being trained. So I think if the healing spheres are removed, the spell healing spheres, I think it's going to open up a lot of opportunities to get a kill on monks, especially from a class that, like a rogue, for instance, that has to kind of stick on the monk and it relies heavily on interrupting casts. And when there's no cast being interrupted, it's really hard to score a kill. So I think definitely maybe if they make monks more hot based, that will kind of remedy a lot of the balance issues that are going to occur from this. But I think this is a problem because currently the ability is too strong, but not having the ability makes monks too weak. So I think if you have some in between, I think that would be good. And I think the only answer to that in between would be to make them more hot based and less reliant on casts. And I don't know. I think that might be the direction that they need to head to make sure that monks can remain viable.
Well, it's going to be super interesting to see how all of these classes turn out in the Warlords of Draenor beta when it's finally becoming active. Super excited for it. And that is pretty much it for the 23rd PvP Live podcast. I'm going to start off with myself because I feel like everyone always takes my things. Whenever I say, do the last minute shout outs, I have to give a last minute shout to chat. This is probably, this episode of this chat has probably been the best I've ever seen. JD, Jeff, can you agree with me on that? I mean, this is a very interactive chat today. I'm super pumped about this one.
This chat was great, and Brian Halenka being in here and answering people's questions and interacting with everybody, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
Everybody was really getting amped up.
Absolutely.
I feel like every week the chat just gets better and better.
I agree.
It's true.
We always have
better
true. Chat. We're always like, whoa, chat was really great tonight. Whoa.
Yeah.
Tonight's chat was the best chat ever.
Yeah.
But it's not just fluff. It's actually true because it does keep improving.
It does. Yeah. Time after time. Of course, I have to thank Blizzard for all their support and, their constant interaction with the community. That's something we talk about every week. But, I mean, it's a big change from times past. So I think it's something everyone's excited about. But thank you, chat. Thank you to all the viewers. And JD, going down to you. Any last-minute shout-outs for the evening?
Shout out to chat as usual. Shout out to Nico. Shout out to Callum. And yeah, that's it. Follow me on Twitter, please. I'll probably start using it again properly and actually tweeting things in the very near future. And hopefully, fingers crossed, I will actually be able to write some stuff. So yeah.
I'll tell you what, JD. Personally, I am looking forward to it.
Eldacar.
Eldacar.
For you.
Thank you. Eldacar, going down to you. Any last-minute shout-outs for the evening?
Like I said before, shout out to chat. Shout out to Brian Halenka, to our great community members and other PvP Live staff members that are answering questions and providing links in the chat. And a big thank you to Bigmoran for being on here with us again. It's really good having you on here, man. And I really appreciate all your insights.
Absolutely. Moran, that's how I was going to end this show. Thank you, Jeff. Moran, thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week. As always, it's always a big pleasure. And do you have any last-minute shout-outs before we wrap things up tonight?
Yes, and I'm going to copy everyone else by saying shout out to our glorious leader, Brian Halenka. I think he's been a good positive influence on the PvP community this expansion, and I'm excited to see how Warlords of Draenor kind of plays out. Shout out to, I guess, everyone who's watched a video of mine and that messages me in game and says, hey, nice videos, because that's really encouraging. I like that a lot. And then I guess shout out to the people who have actually supported me financially for making videos. That's always really motivating for me. And I guess shout out to my Twitter followers.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for coming on tonight. And I just want to give one last shout out to JXLMD, one of our very talented PvP Live staff members, community managers. Thank you so much for being in chat and helping us and doing everything that you do. One last time, please go to pvp-live.com, bookmark that site, follow us here on Twitch. We got a sub button, sub to us, it really helps us out, and make sure to follow all of us right down here on Twitter. Until next time, thank you guys, and stay tuned. Thank you.